You sit down because hunger leaves you very little choice. By the time the bowl reaches your hands, the room has already done half the work of ruining your appetite. The air inside this English hall is thick with damp wool, wood smoke, stale ale, and the sour press of bodies that have been working since first light. A dog noses the rushes underfoot. Someone coughs wetly into a sleeve. A child wipes a streaming nose on the back of one hand, then reaches for a crust. Near the hearth, a pot hangs over the fire, breathing out a smell that should be comforting but is not. It is onion, perhaps, or cabbage boiled into surrender, with a ribbon of grease drifting on top and something faintly spoiled underneath, a quiet note of rot that your stomach notices even before your mind does. This is your first meal in medieval England, and already the fantasy is dead. No polished oak table waits for you. No golden trenchers loaded with roasted meats. No cheerful peasant feast glowing in candlelight while minstrels pluck away in the corner. What you get instead is a place on a bench worn smooth by other bodies, a wooden bowl darkened by years of use, and a spoon that may have passed through 3 or 4 mouths before reaching yours. You do not inspect it too closely. You are too hungry for that. And everyone around you eats with the blunt urgency of people who know that food is never guaranteed twice. The pottage set before you trembles slightly as you lift it. It is thick, but not in a reassuring way. Oats or peas have broken down into a pale mass, and fragments of leaf drift through it like scraps pulled from the yard. There may be bits of salt pork in it, though just as easily it could be gristle. Rind, or yesterday's remains pushed back into the pot because waste is a luxury no one can afford. The surface glistens in patches. Beneath it lies a heat that smells of smoke and old fat. You bring up the first spoonful, and what strikes you is not flavor, but nearness. The spoon has a taste of wood, ash, and hands. Around you, the meal continues with the stubborn rhythm of necessity. A man tears at coarse bread with black crescents of dirt still lodged under his nails. A woman shifts a baby on her lap while chewing without expression. At the far end of the board, someone spits onto the floor, then reaches across for a cup. Every movement reminds you that eating here is not a private act. It is communal in the most intimate and least appealing sense. Breath crosses the table. Fingers dip into shared salt. Sleeves brush sleeves. The same knife cuts meat, trims thread, pares filth from under a nail, then returns to the food. You look down into the bowl again and realize the true shock is not what is in it. It is everything that has touched it before it arrived. The water, the pot, the ladle, the cook's hands, the flies that settled, lifted, settled again, the cloth used to wipe the rim, the bench where you sit, the room itself. This is how you learn the first hard rule of medieval survival. Hunger will force you to accept what your senses would rather refuse. You do not lose your appetite because the food looks strange. You lose it because the entire world around the meal has entered the bowl with it. You step outside and discover that the meal never really ended. Food in medieval England does not live neatly in kitchens. It moves through lanes, yards, workshops, stables, and market stalls, gathering the smell and touch of each place as it goes. The street itself feels like part of the kitchen, though no one would call it that. Under your boots. The ground is soft with mud, ash, straw, dung, spilled ale, and whatever else people have thrown from doors or windows to be carried away by luck. Rain or pigs. Chickens dart between legs. A cartwheel grinds through filth and sprays the hem of a woman's dress. The market ahead is already alive with shouting, coughing, haggling, bleating, chopping, and the slap of wet goods laid out for sale. This is the setting in which your food is handled long before it reaches a bowl. A loaf is set on a board where hands have just counted coins and lifted turnips from the dirt. A fish lies on damp cloth while flies gather at the eyes. A butcher wipes his knife on his apron, then returns to cutting. Cheese sweats in the open air. Apples sit in baskets beside hens in wicker cages. One person sneezes into the street. Another scratches at lice beneath a cap. A third takes hold of the same scales that will weigh your supper. No one pauses because no one can. The market is not careless in the way a modern mind imagines. It is simply crowded, exposed, and limited by what people know and what they can afford to avoid. Inside the town, closeness is not a bad habit. It is the price of staying alive. Homes press against one another so tightly that the smells of cooking, sleep, damp clothes, wood smoke, and chamber pots seem to pass through the walls. A family may eat, mend, wash, store grain, and sleep in the same small space. A servant steps around a sleeping child to stir a pot. A laborer comes in from mucking stalls and reaches for bread. A woman rinses a cloth at the bucket while someone else trims leeks for supper. Even when people try to keep order, the room refuses it. Space is too scarce, work too constant, and surfaces too few. The same table may hold food 1 hour and muddy boots the next. Shared tools make the problem worse, though to the people here they are simply ordinary life. A bucket is a bucket. A knife is a knife. A cloth is a cloth until it falls apart. A hand mill grinds grain used by more than one household. A kneading board takes one batch after another. Barrels are opened, dipped into, sealed, rolled away, and opened again. A public oven serves many families who cannot bake at home, which means dough, ash, fuel, sweat, and timing all pass through common hands. Even wealthier homes depend on servants, vendors, carriers, brewers, dairymen, drovers, and boys sent through filthy lanes with baskets on their backs. You begin to understand why nobody simply stays away from danger. To isolate yourself, you would need space, stored food, private water, private tools, and enough money to stop working. Most people have none of these. The poor cannot miss market day because missing market day means missing supper. Day laborers cannot refuse crowded jobs because wages vanish with the chance to earn them. Women still have to fetch water, carry fuel, prepare food, nurse children, tend animals, and barter for necessities. Servants cannot decline tasks because service is survival. Even the sick remain entangled in the living world through bedding, pots, clothing, and the need for care. So you keep moving among other bodies. You brush sleeves in narrow lanes. You take change from a palm shiny with sweat. You lean over goods that others have coughed near, touched, weighed, and rejected. You carry home food through streets where mud is never just mud. Every ordinary act becomes a chain of contact. Buy, carry, cut, stir, serve, eat. That chain cannot be broken because the town itself is built from dependence. You do not live beside other people here. You live through them, and whatever clings to them travels with the meal. Morning begins with bread, if you are lucky enough to have it. Not soft white loaves with crackling crusts and clean linen beneath them, but coarse bread dense enough to feel like a tool in your hand. The color is darker, the crumb heavier, the taste faintly sour from the grain and the baking. For many people, that loaf is made from maslin, a mixed grain bread of wheat and rye, or from barley, oats, or whatever the year has spared. In hard times, flour stretches farther than dignity. Ground peas, beans, and cheaper grains bulk out the dough. Bran stays in. Tiny fragments from the milling process stay in too. Medieval skeletons sometimes preserve the evidence in worn teeth, ground down over time by the grit left behind when flour passed through stone mills. You bite and feel something faintly sandy between your molars. The bread feeds you, but it also slowly files you away. You wash it down with ale because water is a gamble that begins long before it reaches your lips. This surprises modern people who hear about medieval drinking and imagine cheer. What you meet instead is practicality. Small ale, weak and cloudy, belongs on the table not because everyone is chasing pleasure, but because brewing can make liquid safer and more reliable than water pulled from a doubtful source. That does not make every cup wholesome. The ale may be thin, sour, and carrying the stale sweetness of a batch already turning. It may have stood in a barrel that was never truly clean, dipped from with cups and ladles that move between mouths and hands all day. Still, you drink. The alternative might come from a stream downstream of tannery waste, animal runoff, laundry water, and whatever the town has tipped into it under darkness or habit. At midday, hunger brings you back to the pot. Pottage rules the day because it can take almost anything and turn it into enough. Grain thickens it. Leeks, onions, peas, cabbage, and herbs soften into it. If fortune smiles, bits of bacon, salted meat, or drippings give it depth. If fortune looks away, then the pot still receives yesterday's scraps, bruised vegetables, stale bread, and whatever must be used before it spoils beyond disguise. This is not a cuisine built for delight. It is a system for keeping people upright. The stew simmers for hours, and that long cooking does kill some dangers. But not all trouble in medieval food announces itself loudly. Spoilage can hide beneath salt, smoke, or spice if the household is wealthy enough for spice at all. Fat turns, milk sours, meat sits too long before the pot claims it. Fish arrives at market already losing its battle with time. The handling never stops mattering. A loaf cools on a board where a child with a running nose has leaned moments before. A cook tastes the pottage and stirs with the same spoon. Hands break bread after cleaning rushes, gutting fish, lifting dung, or carrying firewood. Storage is a constant struggle against damp, mice, mold, insects, and the simple fact that wooden containers, cloth covers, and earthenware jars do not create the sealed safety of a modern pantry. Grain can mildew, cheese can sweat and crack, salted meat can still go wrong. Even butter, precious and useful, may pick up the smell of its surroundings as if the room itself has seasoned it. By evening, your body has learned the truth your mind resists. You do not eat because the food inspires confidence. You eat because refusing it is worse. The bread may be coarse, the ale may be sour, the water may be murky, and the stew may hold more uncertainty than comfort, but the labor of the day demands fuel. Starvation is honest and immediate. Foodborne danger is quieter, hidden in barrels, crumbs, shared cups, and damp stores. So you raise the cup, tear the loaf, and swallow the meal, knowing that survival in medieval England often means making peace with things that would make a modern stomach turn away. You try to protect yourself, which is only human. The trouble is that medieval England offers you protection in forms that feel sincere, familiar, and often badly unequal to the world around you. Safety is not absent here. It is improvised. It is partial. It is stitched together from custom, religion, inherited belief, practical washing, kitchen wisdom, and a medical tradition that can name patterns without truly mastering causes. People do not move through filth because they are stupid or because cleanliness means nothing to them. They wash when they can. They sweep. They rinse bowls. They change linens when they own more than one set. Monastic rules, household instructions, and civic habits all show that dirt was noticed and disliked. The fantasy that medieval people simply wallowed in grime on principle is too easy, and it flatters the modern viewer more than it explains the past. You feel this correction the moment you watch a woman scrub a cooking pot with sand and hot water until her wrists shine with effort. A servant carries out dirty rushes from the floor. Someone rinses hands before kneading dough. Better households prize clean tablecloths, fresh straw, aired bedding, and washing basins. Public bathhouses existed in many medieval towns at different times, though they rose and declined with shifting custom, suspicion, and local conditions. Soap was known. Combs were used. Lice were hated. Bad smells were not welcomed as part of a picturesque old world. They were a sign that something was wrong, neglected, or decaying. But cleanliness lives inside sharp limits. Water must be fetched, heated, carried, and spared. Fuel costs labor. Soap costs money. Cloth wears thin. Cold weather punishes washing. A household with servants can maintain standards that a laboring family crowded into one room simply cannot. You may wash your hands, then touch the same latch as everyone else. You may clean a bowl, then fill it from a pot stirred all day. You may change your shirt, then sleep on bedding shared with vermin. Hygiene exists, but it is constantly outmatched by the density of life. Medicine brings its own uneasy comfort. A learned physician might speak of humors, of balancing heat and cold, moisture and dryness within the body. Illness is often understood through imbalance, corruption, or poisoned air rather than invisible organisms. That framework can produce advice that sometimes helps by accident and sometimes harms with confidence. You're told to avoid foul vapors, and to be fair, foul vapors do often hang over foul places. People are not foolish to connect stench with danger. Rotting waste, stagnant ditches, crowded rooms, and unclean air really do travel with sickness. The mistake lies in thinking smell itself is the enemy, or that pleasant fragrance can overpower the deeper cause. So the town fights fear with scent and smoke. Herbs are burned. Rosemary, juniper, and other strong plants are carried, strewn, or hung indoors. Incense drifts through churches. Houses are smoked to cleanse them. Vinegar is prized for washing, wiping, or soaking cloths. Posies are pressed to the nose. Windows are opened when weather allows. Fires are kept going. The body moves through a cloud of attempted correction, as though enough sweet or bitter odor might argue death out of the room. Sometimes these measures improve a space in small, practical ways. Smoke can drive off insects. Airing rooms can lessen damp. Vinegar can clean surfaces to a degree. But none of it creates the shield people want. Then come the remedies that ask your body to surrender more. Bloodletting promises balance by removing what is thought excessive or corrupted. A barber or healer opens a vein, and you watch red certainty spill into a bowl while the patient goes pale and weak. Purges and laxatives aim to force illness out by violence from within. Poultices of herbs, grease, bread, onion, or resin are laid against swellings or fevers. Some soothe, some irritate, some simply occupy the mind with action, which matters more than you might think in a world where helplessness is its own torment. Religious remedies exist beside medical ones with no sense of contradiction. You pray to saints, you wear charms, you recite verses, you attend processions, you confess sins because suffering never feels entirely separate from judgment. And that is the cruelest layer of false protection. Illness can become a moral question. If the body fails, people search for meaning as eagerly as they search for treatment. Was God offended? Was the air corrupted? Was the season wrong? Did a bad conjunction rise in the heavens? Did someone neglect proper order? The need to explain becomes almost as powerful as the need to heal. You feel it in every whispered recommendation, every herb tied in cloth, every basin of warm water, every open vein, every muttered prayer over food and fever alike. What medieval England offers you, then, is not indifference to danger, but a dense web of responses that only partly meet it. People try, they wash what they can, fumigate what they fear, bleed what they misunderstand, and bless what they cannot control. Yet the bowl still comes to the table through smoky air, shared hands, uncertain water, and a town whose every remedy is fighting a problem it cannot quite see. By now, you understand that the meal is never just a meal. It is part of a larger machinery of contact, and death moves through that machinery with terrible patience. In medieval England, plague does not arrive as a single dramatic event you can clearly see and avoid. It enters as rumor first, a cart that did not return, a house suddenly shuttered, a servant gone from market, a bell ringing too often, a lane people begin to avoid without admitting why. Then the pattern thickens. A porter collapses after carrying sacks all week. A child who seemed only tired by morning is burning by dusk. A woman who served supper yesterday now lies in bed with a pounding head, vomiting, and a swelling in the groin or under the arm that hurts so sharply she cannot bear the touch of cloth. You begin to realize the town has become a network for carrying more than food, trade, and gossip. The exact movement of plague is still debated in places and periods, and the medieval world understood it through different ideas than modern science does. But what is clear is that crowded human environments gave disease many ways to travel. Fleas riding on rats or other animals have long been tied to outbreaks of bubonic plague. Human parasites such as lice and fleas may also have played a role in spreading infection in dense, impoverished communities. Cloth, bedding, and stored goods created sheltered worlds of their own, warm with skin, grease, hair, and blood. In a town where people sleep close, share benches, borrow coverings, reuse garments, and lie sick on straw that is changed too slowly, the body never stands alone. It is always wrapped in a small ecosystem of creatures and fibers, moving between one life and another. That is what makes the danger feel so intimate. A flea does not announce itself as destiny. It bites and vanishes. A blanket seems like mercy until it becomes a carrier of heat, sweat, and vermin. A coat taken from a dead relative may look like thrift and prove something darker. The wool on your shoulders, the rushes beneath your feet, the bedding in the corner, the pack saddle, the grain sack, the fur lining, the mattress ticking, all of it can shelter the little agents that make town life possible for disease. Death hides in things made for warmth and continuity. In colder weather especially, the desire to preserve fabric, share cover, and keep bodies close becomes one more advantage for illness. And still, that is not the whole terror. Some victims show the classic swellings people later call buboes, painful enlargements in the groin, armpit, or neck where the body seems to trap its own panic beneath the skin. They begin as tenderness, then become hot, taut, and unbearable, as if a knot of fire has been tied inside the flesh. Fever follows hard behind. The mouth dries, the head pounds, joints ache, the eyes lose focus. Sweat soaks the shirt, then chills it. The patient may ramble, mutter, beg for water, or drift into a silence that frightens the room more than screaming would. Others decline with different patterns. Some cough, some spit blood. Some weaken so fast the body seems to fall inward on itself, as though whatever held the person upright has slipped loose. You witness the speed, and that is what breaks the mind. A healthy laborer is splitting wood one day and dead soon after. A servant carrying trenchers at noon is shivering uncontrollably by night. A mother lifts her child, then cannot rise from her own bedding the next morning. Medieval people knew many illnesses moved slowly. Plague often does not grant that slow mercy. It can rush. The town learns this quickly. When an illness can seize a person within days and carry them to the grave before the household has even decided whether to hope. Fear becomes practical. Every glance at a flushed cheek becomes a calculation. Every cough becomes an omen. The meal table changes first. A person who seemed merely tired now leaves food untouched. Bread dries beside the hand. Ale turns warm in the cup. Appetite fails because the body is too busy fighting. This is one of the quiet signatures of serious illness. The ordinary desire for broth or bread vanishes, and the bowl that once symbolized survival becomes a witness to withdrawal. You watch someone push it away, not in disgust but because swallowing now feels impossible. Lips crack, teeth chatter, sweat beads along the hairline. The room that once smelled merely cramped and sour takes on a new scent of sickness, a heavy mix of fever, stale breath, urine, and fear. Then objects begin to matter in a new way. The spoon used by the sick person is set down and stared at. The bedding must be handled. The clothes must be changed or removed. Chamber pots must be emptied. The mattress has to be turned. Someone has to hold the head while water is offered. Someone has to wipe the face. Someone has to lift the body when strength goes out of it. Care itself becomes exposure. The more helpless the patient, the more another person must touch what the patient has touched. Women, servants, older children, and the poor often shoulder this risk because households cannot function otherwise. In a richer home, servants absorb it. In a poorer one, family does. Either way, love and necessity force hands into danger. The house does not seal itself off. It leaks. Neighbors come to ask questions. Priests arrive for confession or last rites. Bread is delivered. Water is fetched. A hired bearer may carry out bedding or carry in a coffin board. If death comes, the body must be moved. The blanket wrapped around the corpse was a blanket used by the living. The room where the dying gasped is still the room where others sleep. The shirt worn through fever may be washed, stored, mended, or sold if poverty demands it. In a world where cloth is valuable and households cannot burn every belonging, infection can linger within the economy of survival itself. This is why plague does not simply kill individuals. It rewrites the habits of the whole town. People begin to watch animals. Dead rats provoke alarm in hindsight, though medieval observers did not frame the problem in modern terms. People watch each other too. A flushed face at a market, a person leaning against a wall too long, a cart carrying more than produce, doors closed in daylight, bells with no rest between them. Grave digging becomes labor like any other, only heavier and more feared. Priests move from bed to bed until some fall sick themselves. Officials may try rules, inspections, isolation, movement controls, or burial measures depending on time and place. But enforcement collides with poverty, denial, and the simple fact that towns run on movement. Crowding deepens everything. The poor suffer hardest because their bodies and belongings exist in compressed space. They own fewer clothes and wear them longer. They sleep close. They borrow and inherit. They eat from shared dishes. Their rooms hold people, tools, fuel, food, and bedding together in one breathing volume of air. If fleas, lice, or infected droplets move easily in such conditions, then poverty becomes not just hardship, but acceleration. Wealth can buy distance, better food, more rooms, private care, and temporary retreat. It cannot buy certainty, but it can purchase time and thinner contact. The poor rarely receive even that. Then come the moments no chronicler needs to embellish. A child crying because no one answers from the bedding corner. A wife touching her husband's face and pulling back at the heat. A man too weak to stand soiling himself where he lies. The priest murmuring prayers over a body that still seems to contain the person you spoke to yesterday. The hasty burial. The linen wrapped tight. The hands that do not linger. The bench at supper with one place empty and no one willing to mention the name because names make absence too precise. What makes plague unbearable is not only its death toll. It is the way it weaponizes the ordinary. Cloth, food, touch, labor, care, warmth, and proximity all become suspect. Yet none can be fully abandoned. You still need bread brought in, water drawn, fires kept, sheets changed, children held, bodies buried. The very acts that prove you are human also expose you to what might end you. So death moves through town not like a dramatic invader crashing the gate, but like a presence already woven into the fabric of daily life. It rides on vermin hidden in bedding. It thrives in crowded rooms. It follows the path of care from hand to skin, to cloth to straw, to another hand. It sits quietly beside the bowl, waits in the blanket, travels with the cart, and reaches you through the same closeness that makes survival possible. By the time you understand this fully, the town around you has already changed its face. Meals are quieter. Eyes linger longer on signs of weakness. Every shared object holds a question. Every touch asks a price. Fear changes the room before it changes the law. You notice it first in hesitation. A hand stops just short of another shoulder. A cup once passed without thought is now left on the table for the next person to take alone. A mother studies her child's face too long before kissing the forehead. A neighbor who once entered without knocking now lingers outside, calling through wood instead of crossing the threshold. Nothing dramatic has happened in that moment, and yet everything feels altered. The town still stands. The ovens still bake. The carts still creak through mud, but trust has thinned. People begin to live beside one another with the strained alertness of animals sharing a shrinking patch of ground. You learn that fear is exhausting because it never quite allows rest. If someone coughs in the night, you listen. If footsteps stop outside the door, you wonder who has come and why. If a face looks pale in morning light, your mind runs ahead before your voice does. Every ordinary weakness becomes suspicious. Hunger, fatigue, chills, a headache after hard labor. All of them can now be read as the opening line of disaster. People watch one another with a painful mixture of concern and self-defense. Compassion remains, but it has to fight its way through dread before it can act. This strain settles hardest on the people with the fewest choices. Laborers cannot withdraw because rent, bread, and fuel do not pause for fear. They carry goods, clean spaces, dig graves, tend animals, and keep working in close quarters because the alternative is immediate ruin. The poor suffer not only because they have less food and weaker shelter, but because they lack the ability to create distance. One room means one room. One bed means one bed. One blanket still has to cover whoever is left. The same household object must keep serving because there is no second one waiting on a shelf. Women often bear a different cruelty. They are expected to feed, wash, carry, soothe, and remain steady while danger gathers around the domestic tasks that cannot be refused. The bowl must still be filled. The child must still be held. The sick body must still be turned. The floor must still be swept. Caregiving sounds gentle from a distance. Inside a plague-struck town, it can mean lifting fevered limbs, rinsing fouled cloth, wiping mouths, and staying close to suffering because there is no one else to do it. Children, too, are trapped inside dependence. They cannot judge risk clearly, cannot flee on their own, and often remain pressed into the same air. Same bedding, same hunger, same terror as the adults around them. Then there are the forgotten people, the ones history rarely lingers over for long. Servants sleeping near the kitchen, widows with no strong protector, elderly laborers who can no longer earn much but still need to eat, apprentices far from family, orphans, carriers, washerwomen, the poor woman selling scraps in the market, the boy sent to fetch water through streets everyone now dreads. These are the lives most exposed and least recorded. Yet they hold up the town through its worst moments. Fear strips identity down to function. Who can still work? Who can still carry? who can still nurse, who must be avoided, who can be spared. And beneath that hard arithmetic remains another truth, quieter and sadder. People do not stop needing one another just because need has become dangerous. That is the misery of it. Love, duty, and survival keep drawing bodies together long after trust has begun to fracture. In such a world, endurance is not heroic in a grand way. It is small, tired, frightened, and constant. In the end, medieval England does not fail to feed you because it lacks food alone. It fails because every act of survival is bound to a system too crowded, too fragile, and too exposed to keep danger out for long. You can work hard, pray sincerely, wash what you can, eat what is set before you, and still find that none of it guarantees safety. The bowl on the table, the ale in the cup, the bread in your hand, the blanket on the bed, the hand that tends the sick. All of it belongs to a world where protection has limits. Survival depends less on wisdom than on endurance, circumstance, and the strange mercy of not being in the wrong room at the wrong hour. The human body is resilient, but it is not infinitely so. In a town shaped by hunger, crowding, labor, and fear, resilience is asked to do more than flesh was ever meant to bear. Plague leaves more behind than graves. It changes how people think about work, closeness, and the value of a life. Labor grows more precious when so many hands are gone. Communities begin to remember absence as part of daily reality. Belief hardens in some places and fractures in others. Old assumptions about order, justice, and divine favor do not emerge untouched from repeated waves of death. Even when the streets fill again and markets reopen, memory lingers in habits, in caution, in stories told too quietly at supper. That may be the most haunting truth of all. The first meal is not simply unpleasant, it is a revelation. It shows you that history was never made only by kings, battles, and cathedrals, but by ordinary people trying to eat, share space, trust one another, and stay alive inside conditions that often gave them very little mercy. What this world reveals is not medieval weakness, but human stubbornness. Even with fear in the bowl and death moving through the room, people still cooked, carried, tended, buried, and began another day. That is not comfort, but it is endurance. And sometimes endurance is the only victory a body gets.